Silas Hartley's hands trembled as he stared at the empty stagecoach. Snow swirled around him like 1,000 frozen ghosts. December 15th, 1883, the day his mail-order bride was supposed to arrive. But Lydia Barrett was not among the weary passengers stumbling into Oak Hollow. She was out there somewhere in the Wyoming wilderness, lost in the worst blizzard the territory had seen in 20 years. And if he did not find her soon, the woman he had never met but already loved through ink and paper would become just another frozen memory buried beneath the snow. If you are watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story travels. Now let me take you back to where it all began. The wind howled like a dying animal across the Wyoming plains. It carried with it the bitter promise of death. Silas stood on the porch of his ranch house that morning. He squinted through the endless white that had devoured his world for the past 3 days. His weathered hands gripped the wooden railing so hard his knuckles had gone pale beneath the leather of his work gloves. Behind him, through the frosted window, he could see his son Jonah's small face pressed against the glass, breath fogging the pain as the boy watched his father with worried eyes. 11 years old, and already the kid had learned to read the signs of a man coming undone. "She ain't coming, Pa," Jonah had said that morning, his voice small but certain. The storm got her. Silas had not answered, could not answer, because deep in his gut, beneath the layers of wool and leather and stubborn cowboy pride, he knew his son might be right. 3 months ago, Silas had done something he swore he would never do. He placed an advertisement in a Boston newspaper for a mail-order bride. Not because he was lonely, he told himself. Not because the ranch house felt too big and too quiet since Sarah died 4 years back. No, it was practical. Jonah needed a mother. The ranch needed a woman's touch. That is what he had written in his carefully crafted letter, each word chosen with the precision of a man who did not trust his own heart, seeking respectable woman for marriage. Wyoming rancher, widower, 1 son, must be hearty, honest, and willing to work. Life will be simple but secure. Write if interested. He had expected maybe 1 or 2 responses, if any. Women back east were not exactly lining up to freeze to death on the frontier, but Lydia Barrett's letter had arrived within 2 weeks, written in a clear, elegant hand that somehow managed to be both refined and direct. Mr. Hartley, I am 26 years old, unmarried, and currently employed as a school teacher in Boston. I will be frank with you, as I suspect you prefer directness to flowery language. I am not fleeing scandal, nor am I desperate. I am, however, weary of a life that feels increasingly small and predetermined. Your advertisement spoke of work which I respect, and Wyoming which I have long wished to see. I can read, write, keep accounts, and cook adequately. I am healthy, even-tempered, and not prone to hysteria. If you find these qualities acceptable, I am willing to discuss terms of our arrangement. Respectfully, Miss Lydia Barrett. Silas had read that letter 7 times before he even considered responding. There was something about it, something honest and brave and quietly determined, that had hooked itself under his ribs and would not let go. He had written back that same night, fumbling over words by lamplight while Jonah slept upstairs. The correspondence had continued for 3 months. Once a week, then twice, then sometimes 3 times, if the mail was running fast. With each letter, Lydia Barrett had become more real to him. She had written about her students, her frustrations with Boston society, her love of books, and her secret dream of seeing the Rocky Mountains. He told her about the ranch, about Jonah's growing fascination with horses, about the way the winter sky turned colors that painters could not capture. In October, she had sent a photograph. It showed a slender woman with dark hair pinned up in the fashion of the day. Her face serious, but with laugh lines around her eyes that suggested she smiled often when she was not sitting for portraits. She was pretty, yes. But that was not what had made Silas stare at that photograph until the lamp oil burned low. It was her eyes, direct and fearless, and somehow lonely in a way that matched the loneliness he tried so hard to pretend he did not feel. "I look forward to meeting you, Mr. Hartley," she had written in the letter that accompanied the photograph, "and to beginning our life together, whatever that may bring." They had agreed she would arrive on December 15th on the weekly stagecoach that ran from Cheyenne to Oak Hollow. Silas had prepared the house, fixed up the spare bedroom, even bought a new dress at the general store, dark blue wool that he hoped would fit her. Jonah had helped him repaint the kitchen, chattering nervously about what a new mother might be like. "Do you think she will be nice, Pa?" the boy had asked. Paintbrush dripping white onto the drop cloth. "Her letters are kind," Silas had answered carefully. "That is all we can know for now." But privately, in the part of himself he did not examine too closely, Silas had begun to hope. Hope that maybe this arrangement could become something more. Hope that the woman who wrote those letters might look at him and see not just a rancher in need of help, but a man worth knowing, worth choosing. Now, as he stood on the porch watching snow erase the world that Hope felt like the cruelest joke the universe had ever played. The stagecoach had arrived yesterday afternoon, 3 days late because of the storms. Silas had been there at the depot, heart hammering against his ribs like a wild thing trying to escape. He had watched the passengers climb down one by one. A whiskey drummer with frost-bitten ears, 2 miners heading for the camps in the mountains, an elderly woman visiting family. No Lydia Barrett. She was not on the coach in Cheyenne, the driver had told him, his face grave beneath his ice-crusted beard. "I asked around. Station master said a lady matching that description got off at the way station near Bitter Creek. Said she was feeling poorly." That was 4 days ago, right before this hellstorm hit. Bitter Creek, 40 miles east, across open prairie that was now buried under 4 feet of snow and still falling. Did she say why she got off? Silas had demanded, grabbing the driver's coat. Did she change her mind? Was she scared? "Easy, Hartley." The driver had pulled free gently. Station master said she seemed determined to get to Oak Hollow. Kept asking when the next coach would run. "My guess she got sick, had to rest, and now she is stuck there waiting for the weather to break." That should have been reassuring. The way station at Bitter Creek was crude but functional. It had a stone fireplace and supplies. Lydia could wait out the storm there safely enough, but something in Silas's gut would not settle. All night he had lain awake, listening to the wind tear at the house, thinking about Lydia's letters, about her eagerness to start her new life, about how she had written in her last letter that she could not wait to finally meet him, that every day on the train westward felt like moving toward something she had been searching for her whole life. "I feel as though I have been asleep for 26 years, she had written, "and I am finally waking up." Would a woman who wrote those words sit patiently in a way station while the man she had traveled 2,000 miles to marry waited and worried? Or would she try to find a way forward? Consequences be damned? As dawn broke on December 16th, bringing no relief from the storm, Silas had made his decision. He turned from the porch now and walked back into the house, tracking snow across the floorboards Sarah had once kept spotless. Jonah looked up from the table where he had been pushing his breakfast around his plate uneaten. "Pa, I am going after her," Silas said, pulling his warmest coat from the hook by the door. Jonah's face went white. "But, Pa, The storm. I know. Silas checked his rifle, loaded his saddlebags with supplies, extra blankets, matches wrapped in oilcloth, dried meat, a flask of whiskey for warmth. I am taking Rusty. He is the steadiest horse in bad weather. Then I am coming with you. Jonah stood, trying to look brave and failing. No. Silas's voice was firm but gentle. He crossed to his son and put both hands on the boy's thin shoulders. I need you here to tend the stock. Can you do that? Pa, you might die out there. The blunt words hung between them. Silas could not deny it. Men did die in weather like this. Froze to death 20 feet from their own front doors because they got turned around in the white. But he thought of Lydia's letters, carefully preserved in the drawer of his desk upstairs. He thought of her photograph, the directness in her eyes. He thought of how she had trusted him enough to leave everything she had ever known and travel into the unknown. She had taken a risk on him. The least he could do was take a risk for her. If I do not come back, he started. Do not say that. Jonah's voice cracked. If I do not come back, Silas continued firmly, you ride to the Mitchell place. They will take care of you. You hear me? Do not try to manage alone. Tears welled in Jonah's eyes, but he nodded. You will find her, Pa. I know you will. Silas wished he had his son's faith. He pulled the boy into a rough hug, then grabbed his gear and headed for the barn. Rusty, a sturdy bay gelding with a white blaze down his face, nickered as Silas entered. The horse seemed to sense this was no ordinary ride. Silas saddled him quickly, his hands moving through the familiar motions while his mind raced ahead, planning the route. 40 miles to Bitter Creek in good weather was a long day's ride. In this storm it could take 2 days, or forever. We are going to bring her home, Silas told the horse, tightening the cinch, even if we have to ride straight through hell to do it. Rusty snorted, stamping his feet, ready. Silas led him out of the barn. Jonah stood on the porch looking so small against the vast white world. Silas raised a hand in farewell, then turned Rusty east and urged him forward into the storm. The wind hit him like a fist. Snow pelted his face, stinging exposed skin despite the bandana he tied over his nose and mouth. Within minutes the ranch house had vanished behind him, erased by the endless white. There was only the wind, the cold, and the certain knowledge that he was either the bravest or the stupidest man in Wyoming. Probably both. The first hour was the hardest, fighting through drifts that sometimes reached Rusty's chest. The horse was strong and willing, pushing forward with the determination of an animal who trusted his rider completely. But Silas could feel the cold seeping through his layers, could feel his face going numb despite the wool scarf. He thought of Lydia to keep himself going, imagined her voice reading her letters aloud. I am not prone to hysteria. That had made him smile when he first read it. He wondered what she would think of him riding out into a blizzard to find her. Probably she would call him a fool. He hoped he would get the chance to hear her say it. The sun, invisible behind the storm clouds, tracked slowly across the sky. Silas navigated by instinct and the lay of the land, following the route he had ridden 100 times in better weather, the old creek bed that ran east toward Bitter Creek, the line of cottonwoods that marked the boundary of what used to be the Jacobson place before the family gave up and moved back to Missouri, the rock formation that looked like a broken tooth. He almost missed the tooth in the snow. Would have ridden right past it if Rusty had not shied suddenly to the left. Silas reined in, peering through the white. There, barely visible, the distinctive shape of broken stone. They were still on course. "Good boy," he murmured, patting Rusty's neck. The horse's coat was crusted with ice now. His breathing labored. They would need to rest soon, find some kind of shelter. As if in answer, the wind shifted slightly, and Silas caught sight of a dark shape ahead. The old Williams land shack, abandoned for years, but still standing. He urged Rusty toward it. The shack was barely more than 4 walls and a roof, but it had a small lean-to for the horse and a stone fireplace that looked mostly intact. Silas led Rusty into the lean-to first, brushing ice from the horse's coat and covering him with a blanket from his saddlebags. The animal needed rest, and so did he if he was going to make it to Bitter Creek. Inside the shack, Silas cleared snow from the fireplace and got a small fire going with the kindling he had brought. As warmth slowly filled the cramped space, he allowed himself to sit, to close his eyes for just a moment. That is when he heard it. At first he thought it was the wind, just another howl in an endless symphony of howls. But then it came again, a sound that did not quite fit, almost like a voice. Silas was on his feet in an instant, rifle in hand. He pushed open the door and stepped into the storm, listening hard. There, again, definitely human, and not far off. "Hello," he shouted into the wind. "Anyone there?" The sound came again, weaker this time. Silas moved toward it, leaving the shack behind, cursing himself for not bringing a lantern. The daylight was fading fast, turning the white world gray and then darker. He nearly fell over the figure huddled against a snowbank. Jesus Christ! Silas dropped to his knees, hands reaching for the person. A woman, he realized, taking in the dark coat and the ice-crusted hair. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" She stirred slightly, eyelids fluttering. Her lips were blue, her face so pale it was almost translucent. But she was alive. Silas did not think. He scooped her up. She weighed almost nothing, and carried her back to the shack. Once inside, he laid her near the fire and began stripping off her wet outer layers. Her coat was quality wool, now frozen stiff. Her dress beneath was dark blue traveling clothes, also soaked through. It was not until he saw the small leather case beside where she had fallen, marked with the initials LB, that his heart stopped. "Lydia," he breathed. Her eyes opened then, just barely. They were blue-gray, exactly as he had imagined them. And they focused on his face with a recognition that should not have been possible. "Mr. Hartley?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but it was there. She was there. "I am sorry I am late." Then her eyes rolled back and she went limp. "No, no, no." Silas grabbed more blankets, wrapped them around her, pulled her close to his own body to share his warmth. Her skin was like ice beneath his hands. How long had she been out there? How had she gotten separated from the way station? Questions for later. Right now, all that mattered was keeping her alive. He rubbed her hands, her arms, trying to restore circulation, held her against his chest and breathed warm air on her face, fed the fire until it roared, filling the shack with heat that would use up his kindling too fast. But he did not care. "Stay with me," he murmured against her hair. "You did not come all this way to die in some God-forsaken line shack. Stay with me, Lydia." Hours passed. The storm raged outside while Silas held a woman he had never met and fought to keep death from claiming her. She drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes murmuring words he could not understand, once crying out about the cold. Each time she stirred relief flooded through him. Each time she went still, terror clawed at his heart. Sometime deep in the night, her breathing evened out. The deathly pallor faded from her face, replaced by color that looked more like sleep than unconsciousness. Silas finally allowed himself to relax slightly, though he kept her close, wrapped in blankets in his arms. The fire had burned down to coals when she opened her eyes again. This time they were clearer, more focused. She looked up at him, and Silas saw the moment full awareness returned. "You came," she said, her voice rough but stronger. "You actually came looking for me." "Of course I did." The words came out gruffer than he intended, emotion making his voice thick. "What the hell were you thinking leaving the way station in this weather?" A ghost of a smile touched her cracked lips. "I was thinking that I had promised to arrive on December 15th, and I do not break my promises, even foolish ones. You nearly died, but I did not." Her hand moved beneath the blankets, found his. Her fingers were still cold but alive, strong. "You found me." They stared at each other in the dying firelight. This woman and this man who had built something real out of nothing but ink and paper and hope. Outside, the storm showed no signs of stopping. They were miles from anywhere, trapped in a lined shack with dwindling supplies. But Silas felt something settle in his chest that had been unsettled for a very long time. "I am glad you are here," he said quietly. "Even if you are half frozen and possibly insane." Lydia's laugh was weak but genuine. "I am glad you are here too, Mr. Hartley. Though your timing could use some work. Could you not have rescued me somewhere warmer?" "Next time I will try to arrange it better," he said dryly. "Next time?" She raised an eyebrow. "Are you planning on making a habit of rescuing me?" "Might be. Depends on whether you are planning on making a habit of getting yourself into situations that need rescuing." "I will try to contain myself." Her eyes drifted closed again. But this time it was clearly just exhaustion, not unconsciousness. Though I make no promises. I have a feeling Wyoming is going to be full of adventures. Silas held her as she slipped into real sleep, listening to the storm and thinking about the impossibility of the last 24 hours. He had ridden out into a blizzard on nothing but instinct and hope, and somehow, against all odds, he had found her. Not just found her, saved her. But as he sat there in the darkness holding this brave, foolish, remarkable woman who had crossed a continent to marry him, Silas had the strangest feeling that maybe she was saving him, too, from loneliness, from a life half-lived, from forgetting what it meant to hope for something more than just survival. The fire burned down to embers. Outside, the wind howled its endless song. And in a forgotten line shack in the middle of the Wyoming wilderness, two people who had been strangers that morning held on to each other and waited for dawn. When morning finally came, gray and cold, but slightly clearer, Lydia woke to find herself still wrapped in blankets in Silas's arms. She stirred, and he immediately opened his eyes. He had been dozing lightly, listening for any change in her breathing. "How do you feel?" he asked. She took inventory. Cold, sore, hungry, alive. She met his eyes. "Thank you seems inadequate." "You do not need to thank me." "I do, though." She shifted, sitting up with effort. "I need to explain what happened. You must think I am completely reckless." Silas added wood to the fire, coaxing it back to life, then handed her his canteen. She drank gratefully before continuing. "I was at the way station. I had gotten off the stage because I truly was feeling ill. The travel, the altitude, I do not know. But the family running the station was kind. They said I could rest as long as I needed." She paused, staring into the growing flames. But I kept thinking about you, about Jonah, about how you were expecting me on the 15th, and here I was delayed and sick and useless. And then the storm came, and I overheard the station keeper telling his wife it might be a week or more before the roads were passable again. So you decided to walk 40 miles in a blizzard? Silas could not keep the incredulity from his voice. Not walk the whole way, Lydia said defensively. The station keeper's son, Tommy, said he knew a shorter route, a trail that cut through the hills. He had grown up here, hunted these lands. He offered to guide me on horseback. Said we could make it to the next settlement by nightfall, and from there I could get to Oak Hollow. Silas's jaw tightened. And where is Tommy now? Lydia's face fell. I do not know. We set out yesterday morning when the storm seemed to be lessening, but it came back worse than ever. The trail disappeared. We got separated when his horse spooked at something. I never even saw what. I tried to follow, but she gestured helplessly. Everything looked the same, white in every direction. I kept riding until my horse threw me at a ravine. I could not find him afterward, so I walked and walked until I could not any more. Silence filled the shack as Silas processed what Lydia had told him. He thought about how many things could have gone differently. If she had fallen differently, if the cold had been worse, if he had chosen a different route. The margins between life and death out here were razor thin. I was foolish, Lydia said quietly. I let my pride and my sense of obligation override my common sense. If you had not found me, but I did, Silas interrupted. He reached out and took her hand again, and you are alive. That is all that matters now. Is it? She looked at him, and he saw vulnerability in her eyes that her letters had never shown. Mr. Hartley. Silas, I have not even properly arrived yet, and already I have caused you trouble. You have risked your life because of my stupidity. If you want to put me back on the stage to Boston when the weather clears, I would understand. Silas stared at her. After everything, the months of letters, the desperate ride through the storm, finding her half frozen and bringing her back from the edge, she thought he might send her away. Miss Barrett, he said slowly. Lydia, I rode 40 miles in the worst blizzard I have seen in 20 years because the thought of you being out here alone was worse than the thought of dying. Do you really think I did that just to put you on a stage back east? Color rose in her pale cheeks. I suppose when you put it that way. Here is what I think, Silas continued. I think you are brave, maybe too brave for your own good. I think you are stubborn, definitely too stubborn. I think you keep your promises even when keeping them is dangerous. And I think, he paused, surprised by his own honesty. I think I have been looking forward to meeting you for 3 months, and I will be damned if I let a little thing like a blizzard ruin that now. Lydia's eyes glistened. A little thing, comparatively speaking. She laughed then, really laughed, and the sound filled the shack with warmth, better than the fire. You are not what I expected, Mr. Hartley. Silas, he corrected. And what did you expect? Someone more formal, I suppose. Reserved. Your letters were so careful. So were yours. Yes, she agreed. We were both on our best behavior, were we not? Trying to seem like reasonable people making a reasonable arrangement. And now? Now I have seen you risk your life for a stranger. And you have seen me nearly die because I was too stubborn to wait out a storm. She smiled. I think we are past pretending to be reasonable. Outside, the storm had diminished to scattered flurries. Silas checked their supplies. They had enough to last another day if they needed to wait for the weather to fully clear. But he was worried about Jonah, about the boy managing alone. And he needed to get Lydia to a real doctor. Make sure the frostbite had not done permanent damage. "Can you ride?" he asked. Lydia stood, testing her legs. She was shaky, but upright. "I can try. Ocala is closer than Bitter Creek from here. If we go slow and watch for drifts, we could make it by nightfall." "What about Tommy, the boy who was guiding me?" Silas's face darkened. "I will send out a search party as soon as we reach town. If he made it back to the way station, they will know. If he did not..." He did not finish. They both knew the odds were not good. They prepared to leave. Silas helped Lydia into his spare coat. Hers was ruined. And they stepped out into the bright, cold morning. Rusty was tired but game, and with Silas and Lydia both mounted the horse, carried them steadily westward. The ride was slow and tense. Every drift could hide danger. Every gust of wind could signal another storm rolling in. But the sky stayed clear, and Rusty picked his way carefully across the frozen landscape. As they rode, Lydia told him about Boston, about her students and her small apartment and the life she had left behind. Silas told her about the ranch, about Jonah, about the Wyoming he had come to love despite its harshness. The conversation came easier than he had expected, words flowing naturally between them like water finding its course. "Your letters did not mention how you lost your wife," Lydia said carefully. "If you do not want to talk about it..." "Childbirth," Silas said shortly. "Jonah survived. Sarah did not. That was 11 years ago. I am sorry. So am I." He paused. "She was a good woman. Good mother. Jonah misses her still." "Of course he does." Lydia's voice was gentle. "I am not here to replace her, Silas. I hope you know that." "I do." And he found that he meant it. Whatever this was between them, this arrangement that had started as practicality and was becoming something else, it was not about replacing what he had lost. It was about building something new. The sun was setting when they finally saw the smoke from Oak Hollow's chimneys rising into the pale sky. Silas felt tension. He did not know he had been carrying release from his shoulders. They had made it. Against all odds, they had made it. As they rode into town, people emerged from houses and the general store, staring in disbelief. "Partly." Tom Mitchell, his nearest neighbor, ran forward. "Christ, we thought you were dead. And is this Miss Lydia Barrett?" Silas confirmed. "She needs a doctor." "Where is Doc Anderson?" "Right here, right here." The elderly doctor pushed through the growing crowd. He took one look at Lydia and his face went serious. "Get her to my office now." The next hour was a blur. Doc Anderson examined Lydia while Silas waited in the outer room, fielding questions from concerned neighbors. Yes, he had found her at the old Williams place. No, he did not know about the station keeper's son. Yes, they would send out a search party at first light. Finally, the doctor emerged. "She will be fine," he announced. Mild frostbite on the fingers and toes. Exhaustion, but nothing permanent. She is tougher than she looks. Relief made Silas's knees weak. "Can I see her?" "She is asking for you." Lydia was sitting up in the examination room, her hands bandaged, her face clean of dirt and ice. She looked exhausted but alert. When Silas entered, she smiled. "The doctor says I am going to survive after all. Disappointing, I know. You were probably hoping for a more dramatic ending to this adventure." I have had enough drama to last me a lifetime, thanks." Silas pulled up a chair and sat. "How do you feel?" "Like I have been thrown from a horse and left in the snow for a day." She held up her bandaged hands. "But he says I will heal. No permanent damage." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Lydia spoke quietly. "What happens now, Silas?" "Now?" He thought about it. About the ranch waiting for them. About Jonah, who would be desperate to know his father was safe. About this woman who had traveled so far and risked so much. Now we go home. If you still want to your ranch, our ranch. If you will have it." He met her eyes. "Look, I know this is not how either of us planned things. We were supposed to meet at the depot all civilized, have time to get to know each other properly. Instead, you nearly died and I nearly died trying to find you. It is a hell of a way to start a marriage." "It is," Lydia agreed. "But perhaps it is also honest. We have seen each other at our worst already. Stubborn, foolish, desperate. If we can survive that," Silas finished, "then maybe we can survive anything." Lydia reached out with her bandaged hand. Silas took it carefully. "I would like to meet Jonah," she said, "and see this ranch you have told me about. And maybe if you are willing we could start again. Not as strangers making an arrangement, but as two people who've already survived something together." "I would like that," Silas said. "Though I am warning you, Jonah's going to have about 1,000 questions." "Good. So do I." The doctor insisted Lydia rest one more night before traveling. Silas sent word to the ranch with Tom Mitchell that he was safe and would be home tomorrow. Then he took a room at the boarding house and slept for 12 hours straight, his body finally demanding payment for the ordeal of the last 2 days. When he woke, sunlight was streaming through the window. The storm had passed completely, leaving behind a world transformed by snow. Silas washed, changed into clean clothes borrowed from the boarding house, and went to collect his bride. Lydia was waiting outside Doc Anderson's office, dressed in fresh clothes donated by some of the town's women. She still looked pale and tired, but her eyes were bright with determination. When she saw Silas, she smiled, and he felt something shift in his chest, something that had been frozen for a long time beginning to thaw. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," she confirmed. They rode out of Oak Hollow together, this time with Lydia on a borrowed horse and Rusty carrying just Silas. The journey to the ranch took most of the day, but it was a clear, bright day, and the ride gave them more time to talk. They spoke of small things and large things, of hopes and fears and the strange, unlikely circumstances that had brought them together. As the ranch house came into view, Silas saw Jonah burst from the front door and come running through the snow. "Pa, you are back." Silas dismounted and caught his son in a fierce hug. "I am back, boy. I am fine." Jonah pulled away, tears streaking his face. "I was so scared. I thought—" He broke off, then seemed to notice Lydia for the first time. "Is that her? Did you find her?" "I found her." Silas helped Lydia dismount, then put a hand on Jonah's shoulder. "Son, this is Miss Lydia Barrett. Lydia, this is my boy Jonah." For a moment they all just stood there, 3 people who were about to become a family, standing in the snow in front of a ranch house at the edge of the world. Then Lydia knelt down, so she was at Jonah's eye level. "Hello, Jonah," she said softly. "I have heard so much about you in your father's letters. I am very glad to finally meet you." Jonah stared at her, taking in the bandaged hands, the tired face, the determined eyes. "Did you really walk through the blizzard to get here?" "Part of the way," Lydia admitted. "The rest of the way your father found me and brought me home." "That is because Pa is the best tracker in Wyoming," Jonah said with fierce pride. "I knew he would find you." "He did," Lydia agreed. "And I am very grateful to both of you for giving me a home." Jonah looked at his father, some question in his eyes. Silas nodded slightly. Whatever doubts the boy had been harboring seemed to ease. He looked back at Lydia and offered his hand. "Welcome to the Hartley Ranch, Miss Barrett." Lydia shook his hand solemnly. "Thank you, Jonah. And please call me Lydia. I have a feeling we are going to know each other very well." The first 3 days passed in a careful dance of politeness and uncertainty. Lydia moved through the ranch house like a guest who was not quite sure she belonged, always asking permission before touching anything, apologizing when she bumped into furniture she was not yet familiar with in the dark. Silas found himself equally awkward, hyper-aware of her presence in ways that made him clumsy, knocking over his coffee cup at breakfast, forgetting what he had walked into a room to retrieve. Only Jonah seemed comfortable, chattering away to Lydia about the horses, the chickens, the barn cat who had just had kittens, filling the silences that stretched between the adults with the easy enthusiasm of childhood. "And that is Dancer. She is the fastest horse we got. And that one is Old Blue, even though he is brown. Pa says it is because he is sad all the time, but I think he just looks serious. And over there is Jonah." Silas interrupted gently as they stood in the barn on the third morning. "Maybe give Miss Barrett a chance to breathe between facts." "Oh, I do not mind," Lydia said quickly. She was leaning against a stall door, her bandaged hands tucked into the pockets of the coat she had borrowed. The frostbite was healing, but Doc Anderson had warned her to keep her fingers protected from the cold for at least another week. "I want to learn everything." Jonah beamed at her. "See, Pa? She wants to know." Silas shook his head, but he was smiling. Watching Jonah warm to Lydia so quickly eased something in him he had not known was tight. The boy had been so nervous before she arrived, worried about what a new mother might mean, whether she would try to replace Sarah's memory. But Lydia had a gift for meeting people where they were, never pushing, always listening. "Well, if you are going to learn everything," Silas said, "you should probably start with the practical stuff. Can you ride?" "I could in Boston," Lydia admitted, "but that was English saddle on tame park horses. I suspect Western riding is rather different." "Different is one word for it." Silas moved to Dancer's stall. The mare was indeed fast, but also even-tempered and patient. A good match for a new rider learning the Western style. "Come here, I will show you the basics." The next hour passed in a flurry of instruction. Silas demonstrated how to saddle a horse properly, how to check the cinch, how to mount from the left side. Lydia watched carefully, asking questions that showed she was actually thinking about what he was telling her, not just nodding along politely. "Why the left side specifically?" she asked, as Silas swung up onto Dancer to demonstrate proper seat. "Tradition mostly. Goes back to when soldiers carried swords on their left hip. Easier to mount from that side." He dismounted and gestured for her to try. "Your turn." Lydia approached the horse cautiously. Her bandaged hands made gripping the reins awkward, but she managed to get her foot in the stirrup and pull herself up. She swayed slightly once mounted, grabbing the saddle horn for balance. "Easy," Silas said, putting a steadying hand on her knee. "You are too tense. Relax into it. The horse can feel when you are nervous." "I am nervous," Lydia admitted. "The last time I was on a horse I ended up thrown in a ravine." Silas had not thought about that. Of course she would be skittish after her ordeal. He kept his hand on her knee, solid and reassuring. Dancer will not throw you. She is the gentlest mare we have got. Just breathe. Feel how she moves beneath you. Lydia closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. When she opened them again, some of the tension had left her shoulders. All right, I am ready. Silas led Dancer around the paddock at a walk, keeping pace beside them. Gradually, Lydia's posture improved. She found the rhythm of the horse's movement, her body learning to flow with it rather than fight against it. That is it, Silas encouraged. See, you are a natural. I do not know about natural, Lydia said, but she was smiling. But it is nice, freeing almost. That afternoon, while Jonah was outside doing his chores, Lydia asked if she could help with supper. Silas had been managing the cooking since Sarah died. Nothing fancy but functional enough to keep him and Jonah fed. Still, having someone else in the kitchen felt strange. I should warn you, Lydia said as she surveyed the supplies in the pantry. I said in my letters I could cook adequately. That was generous. I can cook basically, sometimes barely. Silas laughed. Well, that makes two of us. What do you say we muddle through together? They made stew, working side by side at the counter. Lydia chopped vegetables while Silas prepared the meat, and they fell into an easy rhythm. She told him about her students in Boston, the bright ones who had challenged her and the struggling ones who had broken her heart. He told her about the ranch, about the hard winter they had had 2 years ago when they had lost half the herd, about his plans to expand if the spring was good. You really love it here, do you not? Lydia observed, watching his face as he talked. I do, Silas admitted. It is hard. And some years it feels like the land is trying to kill you. But there is something about it, the wildness, the freedom, the feeling that you are building something that will last. That is what I wanted, Lydia said quietly. She set down her knife, staring at the half-chopped carrots. In Boston, everything felt so predetermined. I would teach the same lessons year after year to children whose futures were already mapped out by their parents' wealth and station. I would live in the same boarding house, eat the same meals, walk the same streets, and I would look ahead and see 30 more years of exactly that, until I was too old to teach and had to depend on the charity of former students. It felt like dying slowly. Silas moved closer, drawn by the raw honesty in her voice. Is that why you answered my advertisement? Partly. She looked up at him. But it was more than just escape. Your letters were so alive. You wrote about this place like it mattered, like you were part of something bigger than yourself. And I thought maybe if I came here I could be part of it too. You are part of it, Silas said firmly. You rode into a blizzard to get here. Nearly died for it. That makes you part of this land more than most people who were born here. Lydia's eyes glistened. Thank you for saying that. I mean it. And he did. Looking at her now, standing in his kitchen with flour on her borrowed dress and healing frostbite on her fingers, Silas felt something shift in his understanding. This was not just a practical arrangement anymore. Maybe it had never been. Not really. This was about two people who had both been looking for something they could not quite name. And maybe, just maybe, they had found it in each other. But on the 8th day after Lydia's arrival, everything changed. Tom Mitchell rode up to the ranch, his face grim. Hartley, he called out as Silas emerged from the barn. We got news from Bitter Creek about that station keeper's boy. Silas's stomach dropped. Lydia, who had been in the garden despite the cold, hurried over. Tommy, did they find him? Tom dismounted. his expression answering before his words did. Found him yesterday. He had made it almost back to the way station. Must have gotten turned around in the storm. Was only a mile out when the cold got him. Lydia's face went white. Her hand flew to her mouth, and Silas saw her legs start to buckle. He caught her, holding her steady as she sagged against him. "He was trying to get home," she whispered. "He was trying to get help for me. And he died." "Now, Miss Barrett," Tom said awkwardly, "it was not your fault. Storm takes who it takes. Boy knew the risks when he offered to guide you." But Silas could feel Lydia trembling in his arms, could hear the guilt in her voice when she spoke. He had a family. Tommy had a family, a mother and father at the station, 2 younger sisters. "I need to see them." Lydia pulled away from Silas, her face set with determination despite the tears tracking down her cheeks. "I need to apologize, to explain." "Lydia." "No," Silas said firmly. "You cannot ride to Bitter Creek. Not with your hand still healing, and not—" "Then I will take a wagon, or walk if I have to." Her voice was fierce. "A boy died trying to help me, Silas. The least I can do is face his family." Tom shifted uncomfortably. "There is more. The station keeper, Tommy's father, he has been talking, saying the boy would not have been out in that storm if it were not for some foolish Eastern woman who could not wait a few days for the weather to clear. Some folks at Bitter Creek are angry." "Then they have a right to be," Lydia said quietly. "I was foolish, and Tommy paid the price for my foolishness." Silas wanted to argue, wanted to tell her it was not her fault, that they had both been young and stupid and thought they could beat the storm. But he could see in her eyes that she needed to do this, needed to face the consequences of that day. "I will take you," he said finally. "Tomorrow, when the roads are better, we will go together." The ride to Bitter Creek the next day was tense and silent. Silas drove the wagon while Lydia sat beside him, dressed in her borrowed clothes and carrying a basket of food she had insisted on preparing. The way station sat at the edge of the settlement, a low stone building with smoke rising from its chimney. As they approached, Silas saw a man emerge, middle-aged, with a lined face and eyes that held a deep, unshakable grief. "Mr. Hartley," the man said, his voice flat. "Heard you were the one who found my boy's companion, the woman he died trying to help." "Mr. Brennan," Silas nodded, climbing down from the wagon. "This is Miss Lydia Barrett. She wanted to come speak with you." Lydia descended from the wagon, clutching her basket. She walked forward to face Tommy's father, her spine straight despite the fear Silas could see in her eyes. "Mr. Brennan," she said, her voice steady, "I am so deeply sorry for your loss. Tommy was brave and kind, and he tried to help me when I had no right to ask it of him. His death is something I will carry with me for the rest of my life." Brennan stared at her, his jaw working. For a long moment Silas thought he might lash out, might give voice to the anger that had to be burning inside him. But then the man's shoulders sagged. "Boy was 17, he said roughly. "Thought he knew everything, thought he could handle any storm, any trail. I told him not to take you, told him to wait." "He should have listened to you," Lydia said. "I should have listened to you. I was wrong to push him, Mr. Brennan. I was wrong about so many things. And I know my apology does not bring him back, does not fix anything, but I needed you to hear it anyway. I needed you to know that his death was not meaningless to me." Something in Brennan's face cracked. His eyes glistened with tears he was fighting to hold back. He was a good boy, good son. I know, Lydia whispered. I am so sorry. Mrs. Brennan appeared in the doorway then, flanked by two young girls who must have been Tommy's sisters. The woman's face was pale and drawn, her eyes empty with grief. You are the one, she said to Lydia, not angry, just hollow. You are the one my Tommy died for. Lydia nodded, tears streaming down her own face now. Yes, ma'am, and I would give anything to change what happened. If I could trade places with him, I would. Mrs. Brennan studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she stepped forward and took Lydia's hand. You are alive, she said simply. At least that means something. At least he did not die for nothing. The words seemed to break something in Lydia. She began to sob, great wrenching sounds that came from deep in her chest. Mrs. Brennan held her, this stranger who her son had died trying to save, and let her cry. It is all right, Mrs. Brennan murmured, though Silas knew it was not all right, would not be all right for a long time. It is all right, child. They stayed at the way station for hours. Lydia shared the food she had brought. Silas helped Mr. Brennan with some repairs around the station that had been neglected in the wake of Tommy's death. The girls, young and uncertain how to grieve, asked Lydia about Boston, about her school, about anything that would distract them from the empty chair at the dinner table. Before they left, Silas pressed money into Mr. Brennan's hand. For expenses, he said quietly, for whatever needs doing. Brennan tried to refuse, but Silas insisted. It was not enough. Nothing would ever be enough. But it was something. As they drove away, Lydia sat silent beside him, staring at the darkening sky. Finally, she spoke. They were kinder than I deserved. They are good people, Silas said. They know it was not your fault. Not really. Was it not? Lydia turned to him. I keep thinking about the choices I made, Silas. Every step that led to Tommy being out in that storm. If I had just waited, if you had just waited, I would not have ridden out to find you. And I might have died in that storm instead, or we might never have met at all. Silas reached over and took her hand. You cannot change what happened, Lydia. You can only choose what you do with it now. And what should I do with it? Live, Silas said simply. Live the life Tommy died trying to help you get to. Make it mean something. That is the best memorial you can give him. They rode the rest of the way home in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived at the ranch, Jonah was waiting on the porch, having been brought back by Tom Mitchell earlier that day. Is everything all right? The boy asked anxiously as they climbed down from the wagon. Everything is going to be all right, Lydia said, though her voice was heavy with a sorrow that Silas suspected would take a long time to fade. Eventually. That night, after Jonah was asleep, Silas found Lydia sitting by the fire again, staring into the flames. He sat beside her, and they did not speak for a long time. Finally, Lydia broke the silence. I meant what I said earlier about taking our time before we marry. I know, but I also want you to know that I am not going anywhere, despite everything, despite Tommy, despite nearly dying, despite all of it. I want to be here. I want to make this work. Silas felt warmth spread through his chest. So do I. Good. Lydia leaned her head against his shoulder, and Silas put his arm around her. Because I have a feeling this life is not going to get any easier. And I would rather face it with you than alone. Same here, Silas said quietly. Outside, the wind picked up. whistling around the corners of the house. But inside by the fire, two people who had found each other in the worst storm either had ever known were beginning to build something that might just weather anything the world threw at them. Over the following weeks, Lydia threw herself into ranch life with a determination that surprised everyone, including herself. She learned to ride properly, to feed the chickens and collect eggs without getting pecked, to recognize when a horse was favoring a leg, to read the sky for weather. Her hands, once soft from indoor teaching work, began to develop calluses. Her pale skin took on color from hours outside in the winter sun. Jonah became her shadow, showing her everything with the enthusiasm of a boy who had been lonely too long. She listened to his endless chatter with patience that amazed Silas, never dismissing his childish concerns or talking down to him. "Do you think Ma would have liked her?" Jonah asked one evening as he and Silas were checking the livestock. The question caught Silas off guard. They did not talk about Sarah much anymore. It hurt too much, especially for the boy who barely remembered his mother. "I think so," Silas said carefully. "Your ma was kind, and she appreciated folks who worked hard. Lydia is both those things." "Good." Jonah was quiet for a moment. "I like her, Pa. I am glad she came." "Me too, son. Me too." But the peace could not last forever. One afternoon in late January, a visitor arrived at the ranch who threatened to upend everything they had built. Rebecca Thornton rode up on a beautiful chestnut mare, dressed in riding clothes that were clearly expensive, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the wind, her green eyes sharp and assessing. "You must be Lydia Barrett," she said, dismounting with practiced grace. "I am Rebecca Thornton. I own the Double T Ranch about 15 miles west of here. May I come in?" Silas had mentioned the Thorntons in passing, wealthy ranchers who had bought up several smaller properties over the years, building an empire that dwarfed most of the other operations in the territory. Something in Rebecca's tone made Lydia uneasy, but she could not refuse basic hospitality. "Of course," she said, leading the woman inside. Rebecca looked around the house with interest as Lydia put coffee on to brew. "Silas has done well with this place," Rebecca observed, settling into a chair at the kitchen table. "When I knew him before, he and Sarah were just starting out. This was barely more than a line shack." "You knew Silas's first wife?" "Oh, yes. Sarah and I were quite close. It devastated all of us when she died." Rebecca accepted the coffee Lydia poured, studying her over the rim of the cup. "I have to say, you are not what I expected. I am not sure how to take that." "It is not a criticism, just an observation." Rebecca set down her cup. "When I heard Silas had sent for a mail-order bride, I thought it was, well, desperate. Unlike him. The Silas I knew would never have resorted to such a thing." Lydia felt heat rise in her cheeks. "And yet he did. Times change. People change." "Indeed they do." Rebecca's green eyes were sharp. "Tell me, Miss Barrett, what exactly are your intentions toward Silas?" The directness of the question took Lydia's breath away. "I am sorry, but I do not see how that is any of your concern." "Silas is my concern. He has been my friend for 15 years, and I will not stand by and watch him be taken advantage of by some city woman looking for an adventure or an escape from scandal back east." "There is no scandal," Lydia said, her voice tight with anger now, "and I am not taking advantage of anyone. Silas and I have an arrangement that we are both satisfied with." "An arrangement?" Rebecca laughed. But there was no humor in it. "How romantic. Tell me, does he know you are just using him? That you will probably last one hard winter before you run back to Boston with your tail between your legs?" Lydia stood abruptly. "I think you should leave." "I am not trying to be cruel," Rebecca said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "I am trying to protect someone I care about. Silas has been through enough. He does not need a wife who will abandon him when things get difficult. I have no intention of abandoning him. Do you not?" Rebecca stood as well, moving closer. "You nearly died getting here, Miss Barrett. You have been here less than 2 months. You do not know what real hardship is yet, what it is like when the summer drought kills half your herd, or when winter comes early and you lose everything you have worked for, what it is like to be truly alone out here, miles from anyone, with nothing but the wind and the work and the endless, crushing responsibility. Then it is fortunate I am not alone," Lydia said quietly. "I have Silas, and he has me." Rebecca's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across her face before she masked it. "Does he? Or does he just have another obligation? Another person depending on him when he is already stretched too thin?" Before Lydia could respond, they heard the wagon approaching. Rebecca moved to the window and looked out, then turned back to Lydia. "I came here to warn you," she said, her voice lower now. "But I can see you are determined to go through with this. Fine. Just know that when you fail, and you will fail, Miss Barrett, Silas, and Jonah will be the ones who pay the price." She swept out of the house just as Silas was climbing down from the wagon. Lydia watched through the window as Rebecca approached Silas, saw them exchange words. Silas looked surprised to see her, then concerned. Rebecca touched his arm, said something that made his brow furrow, then mounted her horse and rode away. Silas came into the house, looking troubled. What did Rebecca want? "To warn me off, apparently," Lydia said, trying to keep her voice steady. "She seems to think I am going to hurt you and Jonah." Silas muttered something under his breath that might have been a curse. "Rebecca means well, but she does not know when to mind her own business." She said she was close to Sarah. She was. They grew up together. Silas began unloading supplies from the crate he had carried in. After Sarah died, Rebecca tried to help with Jonah, offered to take him for stretches while I got my feet under me. She has been a good friend. "Just a friend?" Lydia asked, then immediately wished she had not. It was not her place to question him about his past. But Silas met her eyes directly. "Just a friend," though I suspect Rebecca hoped it might become something more. "I never encouraged it, Lydia. I want you to know that. It is none of my business." "It is, though." Silas moved closer. "If we are going to make this work, we need to be honest with each other. So yes, I think Rebecca had feelings for me that I did not return. And yes, she is probably upset that I chose to marry someone else instead of her. But that is my choice to make, not hers." Lydia felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. "She thinks I will run back to Boston at the first sign of trouble. Will you?" "No." Lydia met his gaze steadily. "I will not. I told you I am not going anywhere, Silas. I meant it." He smiled then, that rare, warm smile that transformed his weathered face. "Good, because I am starting to get used to having you around." "Just starting?" Lydia teased, feeling the heaviness from Rebecca's visit begin to lift. "Well, you do leave your books all over the place. And you sing while you are cooking, which is distracting." "I do not sing." "You do. Off-key, mostly. It is terrible." But he was grinning now, and Lydia found herself grinning back. Jonah burst through the door, then carrying a small crate. "Pa got you something," he announced excitedly. "A surprise." "Did he now?" Lydia looked at Silas with raised eyebrows. Silas actually looked embarrassed, color rising in his cheeks. "It is nothing." Just something I saw in town and thought you might like." Jonah set the crate on the table and opened it carefully. Inside, nestled in straw, were books, at least a dozen of them, their covers gleaming and new. Lydia's breath caught. "Silas, you mentioned in one of your letters that you missed having access to a good library," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "These are not much, but the store had just gotten a shipment from Denver, and I thought—" Lydia crossed to him, and without thinking, kissed his cheek. "Thank you. This is the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me." Silas touched the spot where she had kissed him. Looking stunned, Jonah giggled. "Pa is blushing." "Am not," Silas muttered. But he was. That night, after Jonah was asleep and Silas had gone to check on the horses one last time, Lydia sat by the fire examining her new treasures. There were novels by Dickens and Hawthorne, a volume of Whitman's poetry, even a book on western wildflowers, each one chosen with care, selected because Silas had been listening to her letters, remembering what she loved. She was still sitting there when Silas came back in, stamping snow from his boots. "You should get some sleep," he said. "Dawn comes early." "I know. Lydia gestured at the books. "I cannot believe you did this." Silas sat in the chair across from her. "I wanted you to have something that was yours, something from your old life that could be part of your new one. It is perfect." Lydia set down the book she had been holding. "Silas, I need to tell you something about Rebecca's visit." "You do not need to." "Yes, I do." Lydia leaned forward. She said, "I do not know what real hardship is, that I will fail when things get difficult." And she might be right. I have never run a ranch. I have never faced a Wyoming summer or another winter like the one that just passed. I do not know if I am strong enough for this life. "Lydia, but I want to be," she continued. "I want to learn. I want to prove that I can handle whatever comes. Not just for you and Jonah, but for myself. Because for the first time in my life I feel like I am actually living instead of just existing." Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You know what I think? I think strength is not about never being afraid or never struggling. It is about facing those things anyway. And you have already done that, Lydia. You faced down a blizzard. You faced Tommy's family. You are facing a completely new life in a place that is nothing like anything you have known. If that is not strength, I do not know what is." "You really believe that?" "I do." He reached across and took her hand. "And I believe in us, in what we are building here." Lydia squeezed his hand, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. "Then I guess we had better make it official." Silas looked up sharply. "Are you saying—" "I am saying let us set a date for the wedding." Lydia smiled at his expression. "Unless you have changed your mind about wanting to marry me." "No," Silas said quickly. "No, I have not changed my mind. Not even a little." "Good. Then how about we do it in April? That gives us 2 more months to be sure. And it means we will be married before the spring work really gets underway." "April," Silas repeated as if testing the word. Then he smiled, broader than she had ever seen. "April sounds perfect." The weeks that followed flew by in a whirlwind of preparation and growing love. Silas taught Lydia more about the rhythms of ranch life. She proved to be a quick study, unafraid of hard work despite her city upbringing. Jonah asked the question that had clearly been bothering him one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "After you and Pa get married, should I call you Ma?" Lydia's heart clenched. She had been dreading this question, knowing how important her answer would be. She knelt down so she was at Jonah's eye level. "Jonah, I would be honored if you wanted to call me that," she said carefully. "But I also know you had a mother before me, a mother who loved you very much. I am not here to replace her or to make you forget her. I am here to add to your family, not to take anything away." "But what should I call you then?" Jonah looked confused. "What feels right to you?" Lydia asked. "If you want to call me Ma, that is wonderful. If you want to call me Lydia, that is fine too. And if you want to call me something else entirely, we can figure that out together." Jonah thought about this for a long moment. Then he said, "Could I try both? Call you Lydia sometimes and Ma other times, depending on how I feel?" "That sounds perfect," Lydia said, pulling him into a hug. Silas, watching from the porch rail, felt his eyes sting with tears he would never let fall. This woman who had come to him through letters and nearly died getting here, who worked herself to exhaustion every day learning a life completely foreign to her, who had faced down grief and guilt and a whole town's scrutiny. She was giving his son exactly what he needed. Not just a mother, but understanding. Not just love, but respect for the family they had been before she arrived. He was falling in love with her, Silas realized. Had maybe been falling since that first letter, but now he was sure of it. This was not just an arrangement anymore. It was not just practical or convenient. It was real and deep and more precious than anything he had ever expected to find again. That night after Jonah was asleep, Silas found Lydia in the kitchen kneading bread dough for the next day. He watched her for a moment, the efficient movements of her hands, the slight furrow of concentration between her brows. "Lydia," he said, and she looked up. "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" She wiped flour from her hands, concerned by his serious tone. Silas crossed to her, his heart hammering. This was not how he had planned to do this. He had wanted to wait for the right moment, the perfect words. But watching her with Jonah tonight, seeing the gentleness and wisdom she had shown, he could not wait any longer. "When I placed that advertisement for a wife, I thought I was looking for help. Someone practical and capable, who could manage a household and help raise Jonah. He took her hands, flour and all. But I found so much more than that. I found someone brave and honest and kind. Someone who makes me want to be better. Someone who makes this house feel like a home again." Lydia's eyes were wide, her breath coming fast. "I know we said this was an arrangement," Silas continued. "I know we agreed to take our time, to not rush into feelings we might not be ready for. But Lydia, I am ready. I am more than ready. I love you. Not because you are convenient or helpful, or any of the practical reasons I thought I needed a wife. I love you because you are you, and I am going to spend the rest of my life showing you exactly how much that means to me." For a moment Lydia just stared at him. Then she laughed. A sound full of joy and relief, and something that sounded almost like tears. "You stubborn, wonderful man," she said. "I have been waiting weeks for you to say that." "You have?" "Of course I have." She pulled her hands free and cupped his face. "I fell in love with you through your letters, Silas Hartley. With your honesty and your dedication and the way you wrote about this land like it was poetry. And then I met you, and you rode into a blizzard for me, and you held me while I nearly died. And you have been patient and kind and everything I never knew I needed. So yes, I love you too, desperately. Completely, forever." Silas kissed her then, flour-dusted hands and all. and it felt like coming home, like everything that had happened, the storm, the fear, the loss, the struggle, had been leading to this moment. This woman in his arms, this feeling of absolute rightness when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard. Lydia was smiling so wide her face must have hurt. "April cannot come soon enough," she whispered. "No," Silas agreed. "It really cannot." April arrived with a burst of wildflowers that transformed the Wyoming landscape from brown and gray to a riot of color. Purple lupines carpeted the hillsides. Yellow buttercups dotted the meadows. And everywhere Lydia looked, the world seemed to be celebrating with them. The wedding was set for the third Saturday of the month. The ceremony itself was simple but perfect. Reverend Matthews conducted the service in the small church which had been decorated with spring flowers gathered by half the women in town. Lydia wore a dress of deep blue, practical but beautiful. The dress Silas had bought for her before she even arrived, altered slightly to fit better after months of ranch work had changed her figure, making her stronger and leaner. Silas stood at the altar in his best suit, looking uncomfortable in the formal clothing but unable to stop smiling as Lydia walked down the aisle on Tom Mitchell's arm. Jonah stood beside his father as best man, so proud in his new clothes that he was practically vibrating with excitement. When Reverend Matthews asked if anyone objected to the union, there was a tense moment when Lydia's eyes found Rebecca Thornton in the back pew, but Rebecca remained silent, her face unreadable, and the ceremony continued. "Do you, Silas James Hartley, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health? Until death do you part?" "I do," Silas said, his voice strong and certain. "And do you, Lydia Catherine Barrett, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health? Until death do you part?" Lydia looked into Silas's eyes, remembering the storm that had brought them together, the struggles they had already faced, the love they had found in the most unlikely of circumstances. "I do," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. When Silas kissed her as man and wife, the church erupted in applause. Jonah whooped with joy, and even Lydia could have sworn she saw old Doc Anderson wipe a tear from his eye. The reception was held in the town hall. Tables groaned under the weight of food brought by every family in the area. Roasted meats, fresh breads, pies and cakes of every variety. There was music and dancing, with Silas surprising Lydia by being a far better dancer than she had expected. "Where did you learn to waltz?" she asked as he spun her around the floor. "Sarah taught me," he said simply. She said no husband of hers was going to embarrass her at social functions. Lydia felt a pang at the mention of his first wife. But it was gentler now. She had come to understand that loving Silas meant accepting all of him, including the parts that would always belong to Sarah. "She taught you well," Lydia said, squeezing his hand. Later, as they were preparing to leave, Rebecca Thornton approached. She had stayed at the reception but had kept her distance, and Lydia had been grateful for that. Now facing her, Lydia steeled herself for whatever the other woman might say. "Mrs. Hartley," Rebecca said, and there was something different in her tone now, something like resignation. "I wanted to apologize for my behavior before it was inappropriate and unkind." "Thank you," Lydia said carefully. "I loved Silas," Rebecca continued, her voice low so others would not overhear. "I have loved him for years, but he never felt the same way, and I need to accept that. You make him happy in a way I never could. I can see that now." Lydia felt a surge of sympathy for this woman who was trying so hard to be gracious in the face of heartbreak. "I hope we can be friends, Rebecca. Truly." Rebecca managed a smile that was almost genuine. "Perhaps someday. For now I will settle for being civil." She glanced over to where Silas was laughing with Jonah and some of the other men. "Take care of them. They are good people who have had more than their share of loss." "I will," Lydia promised. "With everything I have." The months that followed were full and rich. Lydia was no longer a guest or even a fiancée, but a true partner in the running of the ranch. She threw herself into the spring work with determination, learning to assist with calving, to manage the kitchen garden that was beginning to sprout, to handle the endless tasks that made up ranch life. But it was not all smooth sailing. There were days when the work overwhelmed her, when she collapsed into bed bone-tired and wondering if she was really cut out for this life. One particularly hard day in early May, after a cow had died during a difficult birth. Despite Lydia's best efforts to help, she sat in the barn and cried. Silas found her there, covered in blood and dirt and tears. "I could not save her," Lydia sobbed. "I tried everything you taught me, but I could not." "Hey." Silas knelt beside her, pulling her into his arms. "Sometimes we cannot save them. Sometimes the land takes what it wants, and there is nothing we can do about it. I feel so useless." "You are not useless. You are learning, and you are doing better than most people who have been ranching their whole lives." He wiped the tears from her face with his thumbs. "This is part of it, Lydia. The hard part that nobody talks about. The loss, the failure, the days when you do everything right and it still goes wrong. How do you stand it? By remembering the wins, the calves that do survive, the seasons when everything goes right, the moments of beauty in between all the struggle." He helped her to her feet, and by having someone to share it with, someone who understands, Lydia leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "I love you. I love you too, even when you are covered in cow blood and tears." That surprised a laugh out of her. Romantic, I am a rancher, not a poet. But he was both in his way. Lydia had learned that the man who had written those careful letters was capable of great tenderness, of seeing beauty in unexpected places. He might not speak in flowery language, but he showed his love in 1,000 small ways. Leaving wildflowers on her pillow, fixing the loose board on the porch that had been catching her skirt, listening to her read aloud in the evenings even though he was exhausted from the day's work. As spring turned toward summer, news came from Bitter Creek that made Lydia's heart both ache and sing. The Brennan family had used the money Silas had given them to start a scholarship fund in Tommy's name, helping young people from the area get educations they otherwise could not afford. When Mrs. Brennan wrote to tell Lydia about it, she included a note that made tears stream down Lydia's face. "We wanted something good to come from our loss. Tommy loved helping people. This way he still can. Thank you for honoring his memory by living the life he died trying to help you reach. It brings us comfort to know his sacrifice meant something." Lydia showed the letter to Silas that night, her voice breaking as she read it aloud. "They have forgiven me," she whispered. "Truly forgiven me. They never blamed you." "Not really," Silas said. "But I am glad you have this peace." "I want to contribute to the scholarship," Lydia said suddenly. "Every year, whatever we can spare. I want to help keep Tommy's memory alive." "We will," Silas promised. "Together." By midsummer, the ranch was thriving. The cattle were healthy and multiplying. The garden was producing more vegetables than they could eat alone. And Lydia had even started giving informal lessons to some of the neighbor children who wanted to learn to read and write. Word of her teaching spread, and soon parents were approaching her about starting a proper school. "I do not know if I have time," Lydia told Silas one evening as they discussed the proposal, "between the ranch work and everything else." "You could make time if you wanted to," Silas said. "If it is important to you, it is important. Those children deserve better than they are getting with sporadic home teaching." Lydia bit her lip. "But I do not want to neglect my responsibilities here." "What if we built a schoolhouse on our land?" Silas suggested. "Nothing fancy, just one room. That way you would not have to travel to town, and the children could come here. We have got the space and the lumber." Lydia stared at him. "You would do that?" "Why not? This ranch is not just about cattle and crops. It is about building a community, a future. What better way to do that than educating the next generation?" They broke ground on the schoolhouse in July. With help from neighbors who saw the value in having a proper school nearby, it was simple but sturdy, with windows that let in good light and a wood stove for winter. Lydia spent her evenings preparing lessons, her old teaching materials from Boston finally finding new purpose. The school opened in September with 12 students ranging from 6 to 14 years old. Jonah was among them, proud to have his mother as his teacher. Watching Lydia work with the children, Silas felt his heart swell with pride. She had come so far from the woman who had nearly frozen in the snow. She was flourishing here, becoming more herself than she had ever been back east. In October, a letter arrived from Boston that made Lydia go pale. Silas found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the paper in her hands. "What is it?" he asked, immediately concerned. "My father," Lydia said quietly. "He is ill, gravely ill. My sister writes that he has been asking for me." Silas felt his stomach drop. He had known this moment might come, that Lydia's past would reach out and pull her back, if only temporarily. "You should go," he said. "Though the words cost him, I do not know if I can. The journey alone would take weeks, and there is the school and the ranch." "We will manage," Silas interrupted gently. "Lydia, he is your father. You will regret it forever if you do not go." "Come with me," she said suddenly, gripping his hand. "You and Jonah. We could all go." "We cannot leave the ranch for that long. Not with winter coming. You know that." He squeezed her hand. "But I will put you on the train with money and letters of introduction to people who can help you if you need it. And I will be right here waiting when you come back." "When I come back," Lydia repeated, as if testing the words. "You are sure I will? Are you not?" Lydia looked around the kitchen, at the home she had built with this man, at the life that had become more real to her than anything she had known before. "Yes," she said with certainty. "Yes, I am coming back. This is my home now. You are my home." The morning she left, Jonah clung to her and cried, "What if you do not come back? What if something happens like what happened to Ma?" Lydia knelt and held him tight. "Nothing is going to happen to me. I am just going to visit my father, to say goodbye if I need to, and then I am coming straight back here to you and your father. I promise." "You promise?" "On my life," Lydia said solemnly. "You are my son now, Jonah. Nothing could keep me away from you." The weeks that followed were the longest of Silas's life. He threw himself into work, preparing the ranch for winter. But everywhere he looked, he saw reminders of Lydia. Her books on the table, her shawl hanging by the door, the schoolhouse she had built now silent and waiting for her return. Letters came regularly, at least. Lydia wrote about her journey, about arriving in Boston to find her father even sicker than she had feared. She wrote about sitting with him, holding his hand, telling him about her new life, about how he had smiled when she described Silas and Jonah. Then came the letter that made Silas's hands shake. My father passed peacefully yesterday. I was with him at the end. He told me he was proud of me for being brave enough to chase my dreams. There are affairs to settle, property to be dealt with, but I should be home within the month. I miss you and Jonah more than words can say. Wyoming feels impossibly far away, and yet it is all I can think about. I am coming home, Silas. Wait for me. He did wait, counting down the days until the telegram arrived announcing her return. When he and Jonah met her train, Silas's heart nearly burst at the sight of her stepping down from the car. She looked tired from travel, thinner than when she had left, but her face lit up when she saw them. Jonah ran to her and she caught him, spinning him around despite her exhaustion. Then she was in Silas's arms and he was kissing her, not caring who saw. "Welcome home, Mrs. Hartley," he said against her lips. "It is good to be home, Mr. Hartley," she replied, and he could hear the truth in her voice. This was her home now, in every way that mattered. That night after Jonah was asleep and they were alone, Silas held Lydia close. "I was afraid," he admitted quietly, "while you were gone. Afraid that once you got back to Boston you would remember what you had left behind, that you would realize this life was too hard, too different." "I did remember what I left behind," Lydia said. "The conveniences, the culture, the ease of it all. And you know what? I did not miss it, not even a little, because none of it meant anything without you, without Jonah, without this life we are building together. Even the hard parts, the cow that died, the endless work, the isolation, especially the hard parts," Lydia said firmly, "because we face them together, because they make us stronger, because they are real in a way my old life never was." Silas kissed her then, deep and long, pouring all his relief and love and gratitude into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lydia smiled up at him. "I have news," she said. "I was waiting for the right moment to tell you." "What kind of news?" "The best kind." She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "We are going to have a baby, Silas. Come summer, Jonah's going to be a big brother." The baby came on a Tuesday morning in mid-May, 2 weeks earlier than Doc Anderson had predicted. The labor lasted through the afternoon and into the evening. Silas stayed by Lydia's side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, whispering encouragement when the pain got bad. As the sun began to set, Doc Anderson finally said, "All right, Lydia, next contraction you are going to push real hard. The baby is almost here." And then suddenly, miraculously, there was another sound, the thin, wavering wail of a newborn baby. "It is a boy," Doc Anderson announced, lifting the tiny red squalling infant. "A healthy boy." Silas felt tears streaming down his face as he watched the doctor clean the baby and wrap him in a soft blanket. Lydia was crying too, reaching for the child with trembling hands. When Doc Anderson placed the baby in her arms, she looked down at him with such love that Silas felt his heart might burst. "Hello, little one," Lydia whispered. "We have been waiting for you. Can I come in?" Jonah's voice came from the doorway. tentative and eager. "Come meet your brother," Lydia said, smiling at him. Jonah crept into the room, his eyes wide as he approached the bed. When he saw the baby, his face lit up with wonder. "He is so small." "You were this small once," Silas said, moving so Jonah could see better. "Want to touch his hand?" Carefully, reverently. Jonah reached out and touched the baby's tiny fist. Immediately, the infant's fingers closed around Jonah's finger, gripping tight. "He is holding on to me," Jonah said, his voice filled with awe. "He likes me." "Of course he likes you," Lydia said. "You are his big brother. You are going to teach him everything." "I will," Jonah promised solemnly. "I will teach him to ride and rope and read and everything important. I will take care of him, Ma. I promise." "What should we name him?" Lydia asked softly. They had discussed names before, but nothing had felt quite right. Now, looking down at the baby's face, Silas knew exactly what he wanted to call him. "Elias," he said. "Elias Thomas Hartley. Elias for strength. Thomas for Tommy Brennan." Lydia's eyes filled with tears. "It is perfect. He would have liked that. Elias." Jonah tried out the name. Eli for short. "I like it." Little Elias chose that moment to make a small squeaking sound, and they all laughed. The years that followed were full and rich. Elias grew from a quiet baby into an adventurous toddler who followed Jonah everywhere. 2 years after Elias's birth, Lydia gave birth again, this time to a daughter they named Rosalie after Silas's mother. The little girl had Lydia's dark hair and Silas's blue eyes, and she was every bit as stubborn as both her parents combined. The ranch prospered. With the money from Lydia's inheritance and Silas's smart management, they were able to expand their holdings, building their operation into one of the most successful in the territory. The school grew too, eventually requiring a second teacher and then a third. Lydia had achieved her dream of bringing real education to the frontier, and she watched with pride as her students went on to colleges back east or started successful businesses in the growing towns of Wyoming. 20 years after that fateful blizzard, Silas and Lydia stood at the town's Founders' Day celebration, watching their grandchildren play. Jonah had married a girl from a neighboring ranch, started his own spread with his parents' help, had 3 children of his own. His first daughter he had named Lydia, which had made his mother cry happy tears. Elias was 17 now, already helping run the ranch and courting the Mitchell's youngest daughter. Rosalie was 15, teaching at the school just like her mother had done. "Look at what we built," Lydia said, taking in the scene before them. "We did all right, did we not?" Silas said, pulling her close. "Better than all right." Lydia turned to face him. This man who had ridden into a storm for her, who had held her when she nearly died, who had built a life and a family with her over 2 decades. His hair was more gray than brown now, and lines creased his face, but his eyes still looked at her with the same love and wonder he had shown when he had first found her in the snow. "People still tell the story, you know," Lydia said, "about the rancher who rode into a blizzard to find his mail-order bride. They have romanticized it, made it into legend. Does that bother you?" "No, because they do not know the real story. They do not know about the fear and the doubt and the hard work. They do not know about losing Tommy, or the struggles we faced, or the nights we lay awake wondering if we had made a terrible mistake." "But we did not," Silas said. "Make a mistake, I mean." "No," Lydia agreed. "We made the best decision of our lives, As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, they watched their family, their children and grandchildren, the community they had helped build, the life they had created from nothing but letters and hope and stubborn love. The woman lost in the snow had found her way home, and the lonely rancher had found his heart again. Together they had created something beautiful and lasting, a legacy of love that would endure long after their own story had passed into legend, and that they both knew was the truest happy ending they could have ever asked for.